Our economy is in shambles. Rising inflation. Rising bond yields. Our geriatric leader has already racked up as much debt in 2 months as Trump did in his first 2 years. Millions in food lines and massive unemployment. Welfare instead of work. Debt instead of wealth. Slavery instead of liberty. It's the Democrat way. You voted for the economy of 2009 to 2016. You're gonna get it. Growth was so slow it was like watching paint dry. 6 years just to recover all the jobs lost during the Great Recession. Raising corporate taxes will be great for stocks. 100% guaranteed. How many companies will move out of the USA? Arizona border agents report illegal immigration this year has already surpassed all of 2018 and is on track to surpass 2018, 2019, and 2020 combined. Markets ignore the biggest tax hikes in 30 years coming. Companies pay taxes from earnings, and nobody plans to have earnings anymore, so why bother? Just buy more of your own stock on cheap credit, and dilute from time to time by selling to Robin Hooders getting checks. That is all every big company needs to do. The Dow is one massive, massive bubble. Just another debt-fueled stock market all-time high. Markets go up almost every single day, no matter what the news. Higher and higher and higher as the debt accumulated to fuel the markets goes higher and higher and higher. Why can't this go on forever and make every single American a millionaire many times over? What could possibly go wrong? It will all end with World War III to reset everything for the new beginning. This kind of pandering, welfare system ruins increasing money of those who receive it. The moral hazard and unintended consequences of pandering to welfare society are obvious. They don't want more Americans victimized by this counterproductive, expanding welfare state. When hyperinflation hits, and it will. That's the sound of the World War III fuse burning. Now they are talking about another multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure bill. My guess is that these pukes will run this scam up through the rest of the year, milking every drop out of the free money, and profiting nicely, and then getting out when the dung hits the fan. The public will be left holding the bag as usual. The elites will then crush the market to bring in their Great Reset. The avoid hangovers, stay drunk routine central banks have been pursuing for decades is about to end. They can't push manipulated rates of interest meaningfully lower, hence decades of monetary distortion are about to be wrung from the system, painfully. Make America third world again. The world economy is being run on debt. Our government is helpless, even hopeless. Politicians thrive off the cheap money and the vote-buying giveaways. They are giving us money just like that because money is soon to become worthless. Currency is put into circulation by the sale of U.S. Treasury bonds. The bonds are backed by the collection of taxes. Taxes are mostly paid by the slave employees, while wealth has the loopholes to pay nothing on their profits. Welcome all to the biggest asset bubble in U.S. history courtesy of the criminal private bank known as the Federal Reserve. Nothing federal about it. It is a group of private banks like J.P. Morgan and the like, along with BlackRock, that steal wealth by destroying your purchasing power by debasing the currency. It is a Ponzi scheme. Buy physical silver and gold to protect wealth. Mainstream media and government will never tell you this. Welcome back to the Atlantis Report. You are here for your daily dose of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please take a second to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to also hit the notification bell. I love how the media tries to portray rising rates as a sign of economic growth. Seems to me rising repo rates indicate holders' fear of inflation and creditworthiness of the debt issuer. It's a really bad sign when most money is made in things that create absolutely zero value. That's how China beats the US. Laissez-faire capitalism doesn't eventually work. Monopoly, oligopoly, and duopoly elements are suppressing economic growth. We necessarily have regulated capitalism. And the most dominant economic predator in America is the American Bankers Association. Secular stagnation is nothing other than the fact that banks don't loan out savings. From an accounting point of view, $15 trillion in bank-held savings is sterilized. An increase in bank CDs adds nothing to GDP. Expect more state capitalism, a political system in which the state has control of production and the use of capital, i.e., prepare for a command economy, an economy in which production, investment, prices, and incomes are determined centrally by a government. I.e., the government will necessarily engage in credit allocation. The Fed has no choice. Central banks are passing out money like candy in the Western world because of loss of faith in fiat. Ben Bernanke told the world in 2010 that the fiat gusher he unleashed was temporary and normalization of rates would be soon. It's been 11 years since he told that Whopper and the producers of the world are tired of waiting and are balking at stuffing their production down the American gullet for its non-productive fiat debt. We have had a free ride, but it's coming to an end. If you want a ride, it's gonna be ass, cash, or grass. Buy and hold stocks made sense when the economy was growing, and company profits would too. Now, the economy is not growing, profits at some of our mega caps like Apple have been flat for 5 years, and nearly all stock appreciation is multiple expansion. A much different scenario than what we had before. The corporations that essentially control their bought and paid for puppets in government want to destroy our republic for the sake of their wet dream of a utopian Marxist globalist slave state. I believe in helping those who need help, but not on the backs of others. One of my fears during this pandemic is that we are paying people to stay home. And I ask you, why work when you can stay home? Are we making America a welfare state? Throwing money at people was never the answer. But it sure is easier, isn't it? The unthinking people like free money. And from free money, all else flows, especially votes. And that is what they are hoping for. Note to all unthinking people. There is no such thing as free money. We always end up paying in the end. If throwing money at destitute parents solved child poverty, it would have been solved decades ago. If printing money and throwing it at people solved the problem of poverty, the Weimar Republic would be thriving today. There is no such thing as child poverty. When my kids were growing up, they were impoverished, it just wasn't obvious. Everything they had belonged to me. The parents are the ones in poverty. And when they get their hands on that money, it's not obvious to me that it will be spent on the children. We cannot have free market capitalism with fiat currency and government assistance or sponsored for favored businesses. This is fascism by definition. Any government that supports businesses in any form is fascist. No increase in social welfare will ever be able to match the amount of corporate welfare American taxpayers have paid over the last few decades. The truth is socialism is for the poor and lower working class. The middle class is decimated by it and eventually goes away. They end up poor, lower working class, or somehow make it to the wealthy. And the wealthy always get their money. Democrats want the middle class to go away because they are the strength of our free nation, and with a larger government, Americans can be more easily controlled, to the point of losing our freedoms and liberty. The economic system is fundamentally flawed. America is going down, we can't fix it. We haven't been able to pay interest on our debt for 50 years. This kind of vicious circle always ends up by deleting a currency and creating a new one to forget the debt. America has promoted cyclical consumption in order to forever grow financially. The biggest debt-fueled bubble in history has been propping up the global economy for several years, but began to waver dramatically at the end of 2018, as the Federal Reserve tightened liquidity conditions into economic weakness, just as they did in 1929 and in the early 1930s as the Great Depression took hold. One of the many debt bubbles that will explode is the corporate debt, $10.5 trillion debt bubble. The corporations are often now just making payments on their bonds' interest owed and rolling over their debts. Reportedly, 50 companies got their bonds switched to a junk bond rating last year. Now, as we can all see in our shopping, etc., and as Shadow Stats reports, inflation is substantial and will drive corporate interest rates up sooner or later. I suspect sooner. For dozens to hundreds of the companies that issued junk bonds or quasi-junk bonds, which the companies cannot afford to service if interest rates are only a hair higher, the end is near. Inflation will make their debt payments unaffordable to them unless they can raise the prices to their consumers substantially. Not all companies can do that. We will see what happens when the banksters' Federal Reserve Cartel, which is not publicly owned, eventually raises interest rates in response to inflation. I predict an economic catastrophe when inflation panics raise interest rates substantially, and companies cannot roll over their debts, so they default. Which crash will destroy the whole economy. The reason our infrastructure is rotting and the reason we can't have universal health care is because of the greed of the corporations paired with the corruption of our congressmen and women and senators and the idiocy of people who vote against your own best interests. Manufacturing jobs will return to the United States, but only after the US has officially become a third world country. The good news for those of us paying attention, maybe 25% of the population, is that we see this train wreck coming. There is still time to prepare and try in vain to wake as many family members and friends up as you can. Most Americans either don't understand how we got here and don't really care as long as they have the Kardashians. There are two main ways to prepare: spend your cash on anything that has physical value, had to work for, a PC, car, storable food, rice, pasta, hard metal coins, a holiday house, but budget for cash-eating property taxes, a plot of land, well-researched stable companies. In inflation countries, as soon as the salary comes in, it's spent. Set up your local food supply chains, local store, farmer, market, etc. now, so you already have the relationship when there are major food supply disruptions with the large companies with global supply chains. Smaller local supply chains are more robust, and they will stick with their existing customer and refuse new ones.